The Colosseum. It's one of the most recognizable landmarks in all of Rome. Built in under 10 years in 70 AD, held over 80,000 spectators, hosted some of the most insane events, and yet remains a marvel of architecture, art, and engineering. Today, I'm in Rome with Jobe, an expert historian, to give you a closer look at this fascinating piece of history. Jobe,
yes.
So I'm super glad to meet you.
I'm excited to be here.
I know you came from Philly originally.
Philadelphia, yes. I came here 25 years ago, studied abroad out of Philadelphia Temple University. And I came here originally, to be honest with you, I came originally as a business major, but with a passion for history. For Roman history, it kind of came along when I came to Rome and fell in love with this city.
Yeah.
Everything Roman, I soaked it in.
I love Rome. I've been here a few times, but I mean, I know basics.
First off, Colosseum, which by the way isn't actually the name of the building. Like many things in Rome, it's a nickname or a second name given to the building. One of the great things I love about Rome is that everything here is basically named in a way by the people of the city.
Okay.
The actual name of this would be amphitheater, which it is an amphitheater, and it was built by the Flavians. They were a dynasty of 3 emperors, father and 2 sons.
Okay.
And they're the people who built this, right? But the materials are very, very simple. It's you have travertine. It's sort of a cheap marble. It's not marble, but it looks like marble. It's limestone. You have tufa, which is a sort of light volcanic brick, and the bread and butter of everything Roman as far as construction, and that is concrete.
Did they invent the?
No,
Okay.
Romans did not invent concrete, but Romans were masters of concrete.
Okay.
Which obviously today won't think much about it because you mix up a batch at home, right?
Right.
But Romans were doing it over 2,000 years ago. Romans always want to be bigger and better than the Greeks.
Yeah.
And with concrete, you can build big and better, but it doesn't cost as much and you can do it quickly. For example, this beautiful building that was built almost 2,000 years ago, it only took about 8 years to complete the construction of it, which is insane.
Crazy. Interestingly, the Colosseum wasn't the first thing to be here. The area is in a valley, which would collect water from a local stream, thus creating a marsh or lake. Of course, since Romans have always been master plumbers, they drained the lake and built houses and temples. A lot of them. Probably a sanitary and fire hazard. So much so that in 64 AD, a massive fire broke out, consuming over 2/3 of the city. Emperor Nero, who could have cared less about human lives other than his own, decided this was the perfect spot for a new palace, which included a pond and a 120-foot statue of himself. So humble. After Nero dies in 68 AD, the area is finally given back to the people, and thus the Colosseum was constructed. What did it originally look like when they would have finished it?
So when people think of Rome, they think of a city of marble and gold,
Right.
That's sort of what Augustus said. But Rome has always been a city of concrete and brick, right? So what you do is you start off with the basic elements, and then you would face it with more expensive materials.
Yeah.
For example, have you noticed the holes here, right?
Yeah.
Out of the holes. Well, these where you would have the metal clamps, where you would add the more expensive material.
Oh, so they held it on with
metal clamps. So now it would look as if this beautiful structure is all marble, and as far as gold, it would really be just bronze, shined up really nice, and then at that point it's gold enough.
Got
right?
you. Yeah. So tell me more about the exterior. So I see that there's a lot of different types of columns.
So yes, so you can see the 3 levels, right? Plus the attic, okay? So you start from simple to ornate. Starting off, you have the Doric columns, which are basically the caps, right? Very simple.
Yeah.
And then of course you get a little bit more ornate is the second, Ionic. It's just sort of like almost like the ram horns, right? And then of course, the most ornate, the Corinthian, is at the very top.
Yeah.
You know, Romans borrowed a lot from Greeks, and they just made it their sort of own. So this is not a necessarily Roman idea of architecture. Now to this level, this grand scale.
Right, to the way they took it.
Yes, that's Roman. But the idea is Greek. The ability of Romans to build big, but also to keep things still standing, right, would be the arch. I always say the arch is sort of like a kung fu move.
Yeah, good. Right? I like that.
If your legs are together and someone pushes you, it's easier for you to lose your balance. But if you have a more splayed leg stance, you have more stability, and you're also able to lift heavier objects. And that's basically the role of an arch.
I mean, I'm curious with the floor and all the different ways that they integrated pretty amazing ideas on how they could utilize it, down to, from what I understand, they could even flood this thing for different. So tell me more about just like what was it like?
So the arena floor is basically a wooden floor covered with sand to sort of soak up the blood. And below that, you have the hypogeum.
Okay.
The underground, dark, very hot in the summer, cold and damp in the winter. You know, so just lit up with lamps and torches, and down there you just have loads of activity. The first thing you need to do is to get the water, right? Which actually is not the hardest part when this was built. Because again, Rome being a swamp of the marsh, one of the first things they had to learn to be able to do is be able to drain.
Right.
And also bring fresh water into the city. And that was normally done with an aqueduct.
Yeah.
So there was an aqueduct to provide water to the Palatine Hill for the elites. And for
okay.
this area,
So
for
it's
the
already coming
Aventine,
in.
for the people. So there was already water coming in. You just had to divert the water. Now to fill it up, there was about 40 input valves, so you would come in and it would fill it up. So you can fill it up and drain it within a few hours. So you can have a naval battle in the morning and have gladiatorial fights in the afternoon.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yes.
Which kind of reminds me of like, you know, again, we assume what we invent, like some of the, you know, football stadiums in the States where, you know, they open up, where the floor moves and they put the grass outside.
They could also close the roof as well.
Oh, that's right,
They
yeah.
could also close the roof as well, but the vela, the awnings, the sails, you can sort of see on the sides there, these little slits, right? So you have the cobbles, which were basically masts, right? Where you would have we would attach the veil, and out here you would have sailors, because sailors are who were very, you know, had experience with these veils, right?
Yeah.
So you had these sailors that would, during the summer, you would be able to unfurl them, so that you cover, so you won't have the sun, the hot Roman sun in your eyes or the heat.
From an engineering standpoint, we're just geniuses.
They were able to create these spectacles that you can never see anywhere else.
Oh yeah,
Anywhere else in the Roman world.
Well, and speaking of that, because everybody, you know, again, from your outside of like watching movies and you know what you know just from rumors, so give us some more insight in like, so what would I or could I go see that might happen in the Colosseum for an event or multiple events?
Okay, so let's take when it first opened up in 80 AD under Titus, and he had 100 days.
100 days.
Continuous games.
Oh my gosh.
Where somewhere upwards to 9,000 animals were killed. So what do you have? So they're basically, and these were all private sponsored, by the way.
Okay.
By the Rome elites. It was a way, again, self-promotion of sort of promoting yourself. Maybe you're making a run for the Senate or for a specific position. You want to be consul, which is basically president, prime minister. Yeah. And you want the people, you want to get the vote. So you would have games in your name or in your family's name. You know, you might have a spectacle in the morning. It could be an animal hunt, right? Where you would have these gladiators, bestiaries, who are basically animal trainers and animal hunters, and they would come out and they would literally go on these hunts. You would recreate battles. So you recreate battles. So then you have slaves, prisoners of war, who would literally go in there and fight for their lives, right? And then that would be the morning show. For the lunchtime interval, that's normally when you would have the executions, right? The executions of criminals, runaway slaves, enemies of the state. And Romans are very, very imaginative on how they would execute you. Beheadings were only if you're a Roman citizen, just nice and quick. That's if you're lucky, but not in there. You have some very hungry North African lions or Middle Eastern tigers or European brown bears. I'm using these three animals, by the way, because they're all extinct. And the reason why they're extinct is because of the Colosseum. Wow. So imagine, me and you are on a huge seesaw. At the bottom, we're tied up, we're naked, and on the bottom there are some animals. So what you want to be in the air.
Okay, so
you're trying to just sort of be as light as you can.
So you do not want to be overweight.
But while still not falling off.
Oh wow.
Because if you fall off,
you're just done.
You're done. Man. And basically, when you fall off, we both lose. And that was basically to Roman citizens, that would be the sort of the comedic bit of today's entertainment.
What caused this to then, be closed down or fire, whatever?
All right, so it really starts with the fall of Rome.
Yeah.
And also just changing taste and the rise of Christianity.
Right.
So obviously, when Rome fell, there were the Dark Ages. So, you know, there were just weren't, and of course the earthquakes and whatnot destroyed parts of the building. So basically, I think it's the last official event that happened sometime in the middle of the 6th century, but it wasn't really Romans who did it. It was the people who eventually conquered Italy and Rome, the Ostrogoths.
Okay.
And they basically took over Italy. So again, Dark Ages, right?
Right.
Things in the Dark Ages, this lasts for about 1,000 years. So Dark Ages, things like building materials. One of the reasons why you have a lot of these holes, the metal was very important. Metal became very expensive or rare. So, you know, so metal, just raw materials.
Sure.
And of course, yes, there's a lot of this was built for other buildings. Normally that's because of an earthquake. So there was a big earthquake in 1349 that really took out the south wall. You can sort of see how this sort of stops here.
Yeah.
So this would have came all the way out here, and also you see that wall over there.
Yeah.
So this would be the outer ring,
right?
And even that is restoration work, right?
Right.
So just to show you how it would have looked. So both of those would come out to here, right?
Yeah.
All of that fell down, and they used the material to build St. Peter's, Palazzo Venezia, and other buildings around the city.
So it makes sense, like when we talk about how many different ways it got used. Like once it was one thing, and then it changed again, and then again,
changed again.
Because we're talking about thousands of years.
Thousands of years. So this was built, you know, in 80 AD. So it is almost 2,000 years old.
Right.
You know, so yes, for the first couple hundred years, it was used one way. For a few hundred years after that, it wasn't used hardly at all.
Right.
And then a couple hundred years after that, it was used as a way to sort of rebuild the city. It really goes back to the whole thing about the city being a swamp and a marsh. The only reason this city existed is because it was Rome, and Rome was an empire. This was its capital.
Right.
But if you take that out of the equation, there's no real reason for you to be here.
Well, Jobe, man, so great to meet you, and thanks so much for giving me some of your, we got incredible knowledge about the Colosseum and Rome. It's just so great to meet you. And 25 years you lived here, that's amazing.
25 years, yeah, it seems like yesterday. And I'm gonna tell you, this was an awesome experience for myself as well. I love Rome, and I love to share it.